work that we do in neighbourhood policing and indeed wider policing, the Metropolitan Police, focusing on keeping people safe, combating violent crime, and things that matter in communities, so your antisocial behaviour. And a lot of the service provision you've got here are people that work with us. We can't do it on our own. So if you, after the Q&As, the teams, my teams, the local council teams are here to take and defend any more questions. It's important to understand this is not a one-off. This is not the first conversation we're having about strengthening policing, but more importantly, it's not the last. And these are not the only way in which you can communicate with us as well. So let's refresh how we talk to you. Let's talk about ward level. Let's talk about where you live and where you work, and talk about how we can build back the trust of communities that we police. So this part of the evening is Commissioner Sir Mark Riley's here. He's going to outline the new Met for London commitments, and then we've got the VC Commander Stuart Bell here and Leader of the Council Jazz Atwell. We have had so many questions, so there is going to be a Q&A, but we've had so many questions, too many questions if I'm honest, that we can answer in the time we've got allotted. What I've gone through, so I have had to select questions that I think are most relevant to having the most senior police officer in the room today. So we're going to be asking some questions of the Commissioner and then some local policing as well. The commitment that we have is every single question that we've got, a lot of it is about local policing. We will answer you. Not necessarily on a microphone tonight, but either a telephone or an email. We will follow them all up because they're all valid questions. So I suppose the first thing is to formally welcome Mr. Mark Rowley. He's going to talk to you about the new Met for London.
Hi there, good evening. Does that work? Yes? You have to excuse me, I don't like being pinned down when I'm talking, so I'll move around as I'm speaking, but that's okay. It's great to, that's great, let's go back. It's great to meet you all this evening and to be here in Redbridge. First, this is my fourth of the 32 events we're doing. I'm going to try and do half of them getting across London as we reset policing in London. We've got a big plan for how we want to change, how we want to do better for communities. I'm not going to try and do a massive lecture on a plan. I'm just going to try and spend 10 minutes giving you a flavour of what we've learned and how we're trying to change. The most important bit then, hear from Stuart as your local commander, and then for us to take some questions and answers. The first thing to say is, what is policing about? I don't think it's an odd place to start. But I think it's really important to recognise that the mission that we're setting about trust, crime and standards, more trust, less crime and high standards. Why is that important? It's very easy to see policing as just about tackling crime. Of course, tackling crime is a big part of what we do. But trust is absolutely essential. And if we forget that, we forget it at our peril. And we know at the moment that we're at a time where over the last 4 years, trust has declined. So we have to have a focus on building trust of communities alongside tackling crime. We can't do one of those things without the other. We can't build trust without reducing crime, but also we can't reduce crime if we don't build trust. Those two things are conjoined objectives, and that's why they're on that slide. The third one, high standards. It's a depressing thing as a commissioner to have to put on the top line high standards. That ought just to be sorted. Approach to vetting and standards and discipline ought to be so routinely good that our standards are very high. Because in lots of cases in public where we've made a mess of that. Most of our officers, most of our staff are great people. But sadly, too many occasions we haven't been strong enough on standards, and that has undermined public trust. So I need to put high standards on the top line as we double down on those efforts to show you that we're serious about it and get back on top of that. Dealing with standards on its own won't build trust. If I don't get it sorted, it will be a barrier to building trust. So that's why it's on the top line. So our promise to you is to deliver more trust, less crime and high standards. The second slide, thank you, about the style of policing. And this is really important. This is why, for me, we've launched the new Met for London plan in 32 borough meetings, not with a big press conference. Sir Robert Peel, who's the old guy on that photo, was the Home Secretary in 1829 when he formed the Metropolitan Police. So he sort of invented modern policing in Britain. And he was really clear that policing in our country, in a democracy, ought to be built out of communities. In many countries, policing grew up out of a paramilitary history. It was paramilitary because it was, after revolutions, and it was about military control of the masses. Policing in Britain was never like that. It came out of communities. And that quote there, I think, really captures it. And you can tell how passionate I feel about this because I know it off by heart. So when he says, the police are the public, and the public are the police are simply members of the public paid to give full-time attention to the duties incumbent on every citizen. So the police are the public and the public are the police. Just the police do it full-time. But we all have a shared responsibility, is what he's saying, in having safe and trusting communities. That is really profound, and frankly, if you look at what he wrote in 1829, in this and 8 other principles about policing, frankly, it's better than anything anyone's written since, and Home Secretaries and Chief Constables and Commissioners, no one's done as well as he did in 1829. It captures that spirit, and for me, that captures the philosophy of what we're trying to do. But of course, London in 1829 was very different to London nearly 200 years later. So we're different because we're in a digital world, we're in a connected world with mobile communities. The diversity and complexity of London has grown out of all recognition. So whilst the ambition's the same, how we do it today will be very different to what worked in 1829. That's having the same ambition about police and communities being tied together and working together, but we have to do it differently. And I think it's the pressures of the modern world and some budgets and we made some mistakes on the way have meant that we've lost that a bit, which is why trust and confidence have gone down. And so we're in a sort of bleak moment, and there's a few headlines and a picture of Louise Casey on the top. We did a report about us, which was heavily critical and quite rightly so, talking about discrimination in the Metropolitan Police in terms of how we deal with our own people, talking about how we police, talking about our failure in areas like violence against women and girls, talking about the weakening of neighbourhood policing, a whole range of things that come out of that report. Now, I returned to policing. I've been Commissioner since September last year. I retired from policing 5 years ago, but I want to come back to this job because this really matters. This matters to me, it matters to us. I'm an adopted Londoner. I've lived in London for 25 years. I grew up in Birmingham, and I've policed in several different places, including there. Before I retired, I was running the counter-terrorism policing response for the country, I came back with this job because this really matters that we get this right, and we have policing that works for our communities and our London today. And we have to face into these problems and say, yeah, we've got some things wrong, we've let London down. I made that apology in my first week. We've let some communities down, particularly women, particularly minority communities. We've got to fix that and get that right, and that's what this plan's about. So if we're about more trust, less crime and high standards, what does that mean in terms of day-to-day outcomes? So here are some statements about what it should look like. So where communities know their local officers and help shape priorities. So in your ward, where you live, or in your town centre, I want you to be influencing what the local team are worried about. So what are the most important issues to you where you live? Is it some visible signs of drug dealing? Is it antisocial behaviour? Is it sex workers in the area? Is it people speeding through outside the school? What might it be? What are the issues that worry you most? So that our priorities are influenced by local communities, as well as through the crime we see in the data we see, because you will see some things in communities that we don't see because you're living there. But likewise, we will see some things that you don't see because we'll have intelligence about people smuggling firearms into the country that you won't be aware of, but you want us to tackle. So we have to get a balance of tackling the priorities that you identify in your neighbourhoods, as well as dealing with the things that we can see that maybe aren't visible to you, but are really dangerous and risky if we don't confront them. Second one there, doing a better job for victims when you call us for help. We've got some great progress on that. Our sort of victim satisfaction, the last month's data has started to show an uptick in terms of people satisfaction when they call us to report crimes. Our response, our call handling in terms of 999 calls has been pretty poor, and that's getting back now. We've had, for the first time in a long time, we had 4 days last week where we got over the 90% target in terms of answering 999 calls in 10 seconds. So we're starting to make that uptick. We've got a long way to go, but I can start to see the green shoot, which is great. Keeping serious violence down, solving more rapes, domestic violence and sexual abuse. So all those are crimes that tend to happen in private, where generally predatory men are taking advantage of women and children. Doing a better job with those, we're making some good progress on that. Our solving of rape cases has gone from being one of the lowest in the country now to being in the top quarter, which is, again, start of good progress. Taking on the most dangerous offenders, that's obvious. Dealing with disproportionality across the organisation, and doing the high standards. So those are some of the measures we're thinking about in terms of how we set success. And I get held to account from September of public meetings at City Hall, where the Mayor holds me to account for the policing of London, and it's against measures against those that I'll be assessed. But as the case report shows, we haven't been doing well enough on this. So if we need to do better, we're going to need to change. And so a big part of the New Met for London plan is about how we change. Please. And that change is in 3 areas. So there's loads in this plan and there's loads behind it. But really there's 3 ways we need to change, and we start from the bottom. 3 themes. Fixing our foundations. This is an internal piece, but it's really important. We haven't provided the best training for our officers. We haven't provided the best training for our leaders. The equipment we've got isn't as good as it needs to be. So, for example, in the Met, we've been buying the cheapest uniform available in many cases. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but if you're a police officer and I stood on a cordon at a crime scene at 3 o'clock in the morning, in February, as some of the officers have been, and it's raining and it's cold, if your uniform isn't very thermally efficient and isn't very waterproof, and you're stood there for 3 hours, that's pretty bloody miserable, as I think probably lots of people in the room, not the officers around the outside would say. So things like that send us, if I'm not providing the right fit and training to the men and women in the Met, if they don't feel they're getting the right service from me, that's going to make it harder for them to give the best service to you, isn't it? So whether it's data, buildings, equipment, that's a big factor. We were one of the few forces in the country that haven't issued mobile phones to all the officers, which just makes it hard for them to do their job out and about. We've done that in the first 6 months. It's like the odd writing a cheque for 29,000 mobile phones, but there you go, that's what happens with a big organisation. So we bought 29,000 mobile phones, and officers have got them now, and so all these things are about trying to find ways to help do things better. We've started buying better trousers. It's all very boring details, but it actually matters. On buildings and estates, it's fantastic the work you're doing here. Your leader at the council here, Jazz, has been doing to help us get to new estate here, that we've got to finish up the legal process to get that sorted, because whilst over the last decade the Met's had to make some changes on its estates, on its buildings, which has made sense, it's gone too far in being too far away from communities, because we need to return to a commitment where every officer who is a neighbourhood officer is within a 20-minute walk of his or her patch. And there's more than 1 in 10 of the wards in London where that's not the case, and that's not good enough. So we're trying to sort those things out. So fixing those foundations is boring, but if I don't get those things under the things that you can't see sorted, it's like the foundations of your house. It's very boring, but if they're not But if they're crumbling, it's not very good for your house. And so these are the organisational foundations that make a difference for you. The second thing there is about culture and standards. So the negative side of this is about getting rid of the officers who should be in the organisation. So I've got tens of thousands of fantastic people. I've got hundreds of people that we haven't been touching upon, and we're bearing down on that. It's the biggest sort of doubling down on standards for 50 years, and we've pretty much doubled on most of the measures in terms of sort of misconduct and sackings. And that's really depressing to talk about, but we're getting that sorted and getting that out of the way. But the most important thing about the culture is actually about, if you use the medical analogy, if the hard edge of it is about cutting a cancer out of the body, the important bit for the long term is making a healthier body that's more resistant to infection. So a more positive culture in the organisation that is more focused on policing by consent, more focused on serving the public, has better leadership, sets better standards, where officers feel more supported. Getting all those positive cultural things right for the long term, none of that's easy, but that's really critical to give you the best service. So there's like some technical foundations, there's the cultural standards. At the top, community crime fighting, how we police, how we engage with you. Resetting policing so that it's much more centred on communities. At the centre of that, I want us to build the strongest neighbourhood policing we've ever had in London. We're a long way away from that. We've got more abstractions from community officers than we had a decade ago. We've got 1,600 fewer police and community support officers in communities than we had 10 years ago. 1,600. So, on average, that would be 50 fewer PCSOs per borough. It might not be exactly 50 in this borough, but I would bet somewhere between 40 and 60 fewer PCSOs here now than we had a decade ago. That's a big amount of resource. The Mayor's supporting me in this, and we've got 500 more PCSOs we're trying to recruit this year, and hopefully go beyond that in future years. So we are deadly serious about strengthening those local policing units as the corner of it. We're also doing a lot of work around violence against women and girls, and strengthening how we deal with that, and how we improve our success rate at solving rapes and domestic violence, and also getting better at identifying those dangerous offenders. I think Stuart's going to touch on that. And there's some other work about, other piece of work we're doing. But fundamentally, it's about putting computers at the centre of policing. We're seeing the first steps of progress, but it's got a long way to go. And the key thing about today for me, and about the other 31 meetings we're doing in 8 weeks, there's some stuff I can do, and sort of we can do, but there's a lot we can't do without a wider group. So it's our responsibility to organise the net better, to work with and serve and protect you. But actually, if success is only going to come through us working together, we can get ourselves better organised so that we can get closer to you. But actually, how we work together here in Redbridge, as opposed to in... So in the first 3 days I was in Southwark, Hackney and Harringay. Everyone had a slightly different flavour about how they wanted to operate there. And sort of here, how we work together here will be a bit different again. So we're trying to set ourselves up to be more locally led. Stuart has more flexibility now in terms of what the priorities are. We're not simply saying in Scotland Yard the only priority is serious violence. We've got a range of priorities, and it's for Stuart, working with yourselves, working with local council, work out what's the most important issues here. Yeah, that doesn't mean that we can let serious violence go through the roof here, but it's about finding that balance here, which is really, really important. So that's our intent, to be more locally flexible and to give more power to Stuart and Lisa, so that the central experts that come in from sort of central squads to help in policing here, they should be deployed because Stuart has asked for support, rather than because somebody at Scotland Yard has sent in resources. So too often the decisions on the policing on the streets of boroughs has been made from Scotland Yard rather than from here. But some of your problems here will need that special support. So I was chatting earlier with somebody who mentioned a challenge with sex workers in a particular area, where you think where perhaps there's people trafficking and leave that behind. Actually, to deal with the people trafficking, that organised crime side, needs our specialists in organised crime to do some work on that, working locally. So those sort of problems, we're trying to change the way we direct it so it's much more from the local. So, clicking on again. That's the core of what we're talking about, being more locally connected, more locally flexible, and that's why tonight's meeting is important. There's a few things there about our principles, about culture, about communities first. I'm not going to labour those because we've spoken long enough. Click on again. I think that's, and I've mentioned some of those results on the way that we're making some progress on. So just to finish off before I hand over to Stuart, take something away from me. I'm really talking about two groups of three. Firstly, my promise to you is about delivering more trust less crime, high standards. And I know we've got some way to go in trust and standards. To do that, we're going to try and change in three ways. We're going to try and fix our foundations so that officers are better able to do a great job for you because they're better supported. We're going to tackle culture, get rid of the people who shouldn't be here, and have a more positive culture that helps officers do a good job. And thirdly, organise our policing so it's much more locally connected and led by the local. Those are the three things we're going to do to change how we operate. And there's a big plan behind it, which you can read if you're interested, but those are the key things. We've started making some progress, but we've got a long way to go, and today is one of the 32 meetings where we have a conversation about how will it work best in this borough. Thank you very much.
Commissioner, and good evening everyone. My name is Stuart Bell, I'm the PC Commander. My responsibilities are to deliver local policing in the borough of Redbridge, but also I cover Barking, Dagenham and Havering. Ultimately, my job is to deliver the plan that the Commissioner has outlined locally to benefit the community and to benefit people who live and work in this borough. Myself and my senior leadership team, Lisa and Jazz at the table there, and I know the key partners that we work with, Claire's teams, are absolutely committed to working together to make Redbridge safer and to build stronger connections with the communities in this area. Part of this will be about building on really work that we've already started and trying to improve that. So the partnership work we're doing here, that I'll talk about in a minute, which we're proud of already, and building on some of that progress that we've made in the last 12 months. But a big chunk of that will be about striving to improve those areas where we do need to do better, and we do need to improve the service that we want to deliver. And there's not a single police officer in this room or under my command, I think, that doesn't believe that there is room to improve. And ultimately, we all want the same thing. We want to live in communities that are cohesive, that are safe, that people feel that they can connect with the police and we can deal with crime and OSP effectively. The Commissioner talked about community crime fighting. And that is absolutely pivotal to everything we want to achieve locally. The strongest ever neighbourhood policing concept requires a number of key ingredients. Some of those things we can do now. It requires us to work differently. The Casey report talks about how we need to approach community engagement differently. But some of that does require longer term change, and the Commissioner has outlined some of that. We've agreed locally a new engagement plan with Claire, the Community Safety Partnership, and with our senior leaders and colleagues from the partnership on the table here, that will mean that I and the senior leadership team here will be more open to scrutiny, more available for scrutiny. That is a meeting like this evening, where we stand up and we talk about policing and we take questions from the people who we serve. And we're going to do that 4 times a year. We're also going to be attending scrutiny panels more regularly, so that through the local authority mechanisms, I can stand up with Lisa and be scrutinised about policing and what we're doing locally to improve safety in the community. And I think that's really important, that we are seen to be open and transparent and able to talk about local challenges. The new engagement plan doesn't just talk about engagement at the senior level. It is important that senior leaders are open to scrutiny and transparent. But we want all of our teams, all the officers that you see in this room, to be operating with a mindset where they build community connections, where they go into communities and try to build trust and confidence in a way that we haven't done before. We know we've not done it. And that requires support and help and ideas from the community. We cannot do this to you. But we are doing some work already to improve those connections. We've got a new faith engagement strategy that across the whole BCU, where we're engaging with faith communities on every borough, building new connections that weren't there before, building trust and confidence across all of the 400 faith venues and all of the faiths that are such an important part of our community. That's in its early stages, it's making a lot of progress, but it's an example of what we can do if we reach out to communities and we actually talk and listen. Building those connections where we don't currently have them is absolutely vital for trust and confidence. And that's something that we're going to work on locally, but we do need, as the Commission said, your ideas, your help and your support about how best to do that. The Commissioner talked about violence against women and girls, and absolutely, nobody that lives locally would disagree that that is an absolute priority for us, not just in the Met, but here. You know, in my first few months as the BCU commander, we had the horrific murders of Zara, Elena and Hina Bashir, which underlined the safety risks that exist to women in our communities. But there are also still too many women that say to us, me, my colleagues, that they feel unsafe in public spaces, in places where they should be able to go about their business. We've done work to address that already, and we need to build on that work. We do walk and talks, we work with women's safety groups. We've done over 60 walk and talks in this area, where we'll go out with women in the community and ask them, why do they feel unsafe? What can we do? And what can partners do to help with that? This has to stop as a campaign that Redbridge Local Authority launched in partnership with ourselves that I think is leading the way in terms of changing the culture of a place. Targeting the men who make women feel unsafe. For too long, we have talked about women modifying their behaviour to stay safe. The police, our partners, communities need to go on the offensive against the men that make women feel unsafe. And I think Redbridge is leading the way in that. And we will change the culture so that men that behave in a way that make women feel unsafe themselves. We will get there with that. Metropolitan Police is also looking to target the most dangerous and prolific offenders towards women. Those particular individuals will be the subject of very specific, targeted, proactive policing to make sure that they are absolutely removed from a place where they can cause harm. And that's coming soon. We're absolutely committed to this. Lisa and Jazz, my senior leaders over there at the end of the table, are absolutely committed to this, and we know there is a ton more work to do here. But we have started a lot of good work, and we've started to see some improved outcomes. When I took over a year ago, rather dismally, we were solving less than 2% of rapes in this area, which is absolutely abject as far as I'm concerned. That figure now stands in 11-12% for this area. So whilst that still sounds like a low figure, that is a significant improvement to where we were 12 months ago. And we are seeing some other improvements. We are committed to crime fighting. We are trying to put our officers in the right place to tackle crime. We've seen residential burglary come down 19% in this area. Motor vehicle crime is at last starting to come down. It's 5% down compared to last year. And very importantly, we're seeing knife injuries significantly reduced as a result of the combined work that we're doing to tackle knife crime. It's 37% down on this borough at the moment. Violence still sits below pre-pandemic levels, and it's not me being complacent. But we do need to be honest about what things we're doing well, and acknowledge that there are absolutely some challenges that we're not doing so well at. And we are still seeing too much violence. We're still seeing too many issues around public space safety, violence against women and girls, some neighbourhood crimes, and particularly robberies worrying me at the moment, and also ASB, which often is a crime, which we blanket as ASB, but actually antisocial behaviour, we hear loud and clear, is blighting some of your communities and some of your lives. And we want to be able to improve that, detect crime better, and support you to deal with those individuals who are causing the most harm. Some of the changes we're making across the Met are going to benefit us locally. The way we task and the way we deliver proactive policing, absolutely critical that we can be proactive about targeting offenders and get our officers in the right place at the right time, doing the right things, with the right data and support to do that. The Commissioner has brought some changes in that are going to allow me locally to do that far better than I've been able to do so far. We're uplifting our public protection department by 35 officers over the next 6 months. That department deals with violence against women, it deals with child abuse, deals with domestic abuse, it deals with the most vulnerable people, and it deals with sexual offences. So we'll have greater capacity to protect those people that are vulnerable and to be able to solve those crimes. I recognise that there's a lot of work to be done, and we may hear about some of that as we open the floor up to questions in a moment. We want to be better connected to our business community. We know that there's a business community out there that feels a little bit neglected at the moment. We need to get some stuff in place to tackle that. We put the new Ilford Town Centre in place a year ago. Town Centre's been a lot longer than that. But the new team's there. There's 25 officers, and we keep getting told we don't see enough of those officers. The enforcement work that they've done has been incredible. So they've arrested hundreds of people, they've delivered enforcement notices, they've targeted harmful people, but actually the bit that we need to try to get right is visibility. And sometimes enforcement work in policing leads to lack of visibility, because our officers then have to arrest people and they're off the streets. And that is a bit of a paradox that we talked about, didn't we, Kaya, earlier? But we need to get both of those things right. A level of enforcement and visibility are things that we can do better at. And I think that everyone in the community should be able to know how to get hold of their local police. But that, for me, is the kind of bottom line test. There's not a single reason why you shouldn't be able to get hold of your local neighbourhood team. And that's something we can fix and do that locally. There's good news. More PCSOs we're hoping to recruit and get them into the organisation. I think that'll make a massive difference to our visibility and capability locally. So there's lots to be positive about. There's a lot of stuff that I can fix, the Commissioner talked about, that my top team can fix, and there's stuff that the organisation can help us with over the coming months. The Commissioner mentioned culture and standards, and how kind of sad he felt about having to put that in our statement. But absolutely, I've got a top team of senior leaders who are absolutely, I've no doubt, committed to delivering the vision that the Commissioner talks about. We are going to be and are proactively anti-discriminatory within our organisation. And our officers that aren't that, we're going to help them to become that. We have created new staff networks on the BCU so that we can listen to our officers from minority groups, see what experiences they are having, and respond better to the concerns that those groups have within the organisation. We've put more support in place for those officers that report wrongdoing. I've got more officers locally being subject to serious misconduct allegations, which may sound like bad news, but actually this is a process we do need to go through. We need to support the brilliant officers, and there are many, many brilliant officers in the Met. And one of the ways we do that is by identifying those officers that are not fit to hold the office and removing them as soon as we can. Policing by consent is absolutely crucial to everything we're doing. Part of these meetings is demonstrating that. So we're really keen to understand, moving forward, and I know Lisa and Jazz will engage on this, how can we run these events 4 times a year in a way that engages with new people, new communities, in different parts of the borough, where we can have conversations with people that perhaps don't have a voice currently. I'm determined to do all I can, and my team are determined to do all that they can to deliver the change that we need to deliver. We can't do that alone. The Commissioner mentioned this. We need ideas, we need critical friends, we need to be held to account to an extent, but we need support. We need support in building community networks. We will be more open to scrutiny. We will try to be more transparent. We will try to ask you what you need from us. And we do need community support to help deliver some of these key things. If you have ideas or suggestions about how we run the events moving forward, please submit them or speak to some of the team that are helping to organise this. I'll end with a thank you to partners, all of you in the room that have taken time out of your busy lives to come here this evening. Thanks for everything you do to support us. We will try and do our best to support you. And I think I'm going to be handing over now to the leader of the council, Jazza.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think what I really want to say, I'm looking over to my borough commander, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, the people who turned up today, and the thousands out there in Redbridge have put their trust in you. I think for far too long, the police have been found wanting. We've seen that in the murder of Sarah Everard, the fact that Stephen Lawrence murder still remains unresolved, Zara Alina, and the failures in the criminal justice system. and of course, the low-level crime that is blighting our communities. But what we're here to do is really plead and look up to you, that you are the cavalry. Beyond you, there is nothing for law and order. And despite the bleak outlook of all those unresolved cases, I think Stuart has done a fantastic job. I think the police have done a fantastic job in making sure that 2% of rapes that get convictions is now gone up to 11 or 12. But it does mean 89 or 88% don't. And I think that is a really sad figure. And of course, another figure which is really bad is the number of women who will not call the police, won't go to the authorities because they feel that no one's going to listen. But despite that, even though trust and confidence is low, we have hope. I think I've heard the Commissioner now speak on numerous occasions, and this is the first time I've actually been hopeful that what he is saying he will follow up with. And of course we will politically hold our police to account and make sure that they deliver on what the residents expect and deserve. Without further ado, I shall pass on to the next speaker, and I thank you, Sir Mark, for coming here today and facing the public. And I certainly do want the questions to be asked. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got about half an hour where we're going to do Q&A, and I can already see hands going up. So I'm going to say it's not going to be popular. I'll be the unpopular person. I'm not going to take your questions because we've got loads that have been submitted. What we're going to do is we're going to use half an hour to tackle some of the questions that have been asked, and then what I want us to do is get back out on the floor. So if you've got supplementary questions, questions you haven't had time to write down, me, my teams, your councillors, your local authority teams, we're here, you can ask the questions. And as I said at the beginning, any questions that don't get asked tonight that have been written down, we'll answer. So the first question is...
What's the point of bringing us here to face you guys if all you're going to do is answer? I could have emailed the questions to you. The reason people are here today...
Yeah, and as I said, we've got lots of people who want to ask questions. Give us half an hour to get through some of them, and we'll be back out and I'll come and talk to you.
We've actually been here for 2.5 hours waiting.
I'm hoping you're still here. I'm going to go with the first question for the Commissioner, which is a really, I'm afraid you get some of the tough questions, boss.
Okay.
So the first question
Do you have a copy of the standards of police
is
inspection?
why should females, young people and the BAME community trust the police, especially the BAME community, as the force is branded institutionally racist?
Good question.
So as I said, I completely accept that trust has been damaged by a whole series of recent incidents, and the case report lays out very, very vividly the issues of racism, misogyny and homophobia. I don't shirk away from that. We are changing as an organisation, we are going to be anti-discriminatory. And I've said already, we're bearing down on those in the organisation who don't meet those standards, and we are visiting our policing to be closer, connected communities and be more responsive. And just to pick one simple example. So looking at the issue, for example, of treatment of young people, responding to the child Q incident, we're now doing more intimate searches of children less than half as often as we were before 18. So we've got much tougher on it, been much more discriminating about when it's really necessary to do a more intimate search of children. Sadly, children in this context are all under 18s. Sadly, 500 children a year in London get stabbed, usually by the children. I think it's over 1,000 are arrested in connection with offences of drug supply. So sadly, there are cases where more than just a cursory search of clothing is necessary even for under 18s. But we we're doing it less often, we're being better at getting appropriate adults there, and we're looking at initiatives to think about trauma and other impacts it has. So it's one example of how we're trying to change. Perfectly fair question about discrimination in organisation. We're taking it on head on. Thank you.
Thanks. The next question I'm going to answer, just to be clear, these are questions that people in this room have submitted, so they've been written down, we've got the names. So this is Janet Knight has asked, and I think this is more appropriate for myself and Lisa, why is it that communication is so lacking between residents and the police? Talking is fine, but actions are rarely take place. Also, the police officers in the ward don't stay for very long. So I think this is a really important point, and I referenced it in my sort of speech, but I probably agree that we need to do more to build those communications at ward level. We do have ward panels at every ward. We do have a neighbourhood policing team on every ward with a telephone number and named officers that are there. They are there. And the thing that we haven't been very good at is letting you know that they're there. It's not down to you to go and find them. It's not treasure hunt. We should be better at letting you know who your local officers are, where they're going to be, and where you can talk to them. And that is part of the challenge that we are going to be taking on board. So how do we go to the places where the communities are? Too often we say, come and have a cup of coffee with us in this library at 10 o'clock in the afternoon. That doesn't really work for many people. We need to be better at going into communities where people gather, where people take part in leisure, and offering our support to those places and having conversations in communities. I think it's a massive area for improvement. It's one we can do ourselves now. And I think, yes, more officers means we can do more of it, but I entirely take the point. And the challenge for Lisa and Jazz as the senior leadership team is to make sure that the officers under their command get that, and that we strive to do more to communicate better. It's a really good question, so thank you, Janet.
Coming on the next question. So the next question again is probably one for Mr. Rowley, which is what progress has been made. Sorry, this question is coming from Peter. I don't know if Peter stayed. He submitted this question at 4 p.m. Very quick off the mark. But Peter would like to know what progress has been made in dismissing the police officers who are desk-bound and not deemed suitable for on-street duty.
It was me, if you want to know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. So we have, I think the desk-bound points, we have officers who are injured in the line of duty, and there are desk-related duties we can find for them. We don't want to sack officers who've been hurt doing a good job on behalf of the public. But we do have too many people who aren't meeting the standards, as I said earlier, and we're sacking them close to double the rate we were sacking them a year ago, and we'll continue to do so. We've got more misconduct cases, and we're having success on that. Some of you will have seen I've been asking the government to change the regulations around police regulations because they're very slow and restrictive in terms of dealing with cases quickly and effectively, and the government has taken longer on doing that than I hope they would do, but I hope they'll get through it soon. So we are making progress, and I said probably there'll be a stream of cases you will see in the papers as we have that progress, and it's sort of, that's why it's a case of where bad news is good news. The bad news that gets out week by week in these cases shows that we're having the effect we want to have. It's a painful period we have to get through, but that's what's necessary.
Okay, there's one here that I'll read out from Jenny Chowdhury. Thank you, Jenny. You asked, do we have enough officers to keep us safe in Ilford? We report things, but we don't see improvements. We keep hearing the same speech from police. Confidence is low. What are you going to do now that is different? So it's a good question. I mean, if the commissioner came to me and gave me, more officers, of course I would say yes. We've only got so many in the organisation, and we need to allocate them appropriately. Over the last 10 years or so, we've lost an awful lot of our PCSOs, as the commissioner has described, and we're now looking to recruit back and get that strength back into our neighbourhood teams that wasn't there before. In the last 12 months, we have brought the Ilford Town Centre team into existence. There was a small team in Ilford Town Centre prior to that. We've now got 25 officers that police the town centre. The challenge is, for us, visibility versus enforcement, and making sure that they are visible and accessible in a way that meets the needs of the community. But we have seen an improvement in resource, and I think we're going to continue to see investment in neighbourhood policing. And I think we will see some improvements. I think some of it is the way we do business, the way that we connect with communities and communicate, and and some of it is about how well resourced we are to start with. All of our neighbourhood teams in this borough are correctly resourced, as they should be, but that isn't a huge amount of officers, and we hope to grow those numbers over the coming weeks, months and years. The ones we do have, the officers that are engaged in neighbourhood policing, we want to make their presence felt far better than perhaps we have so far, and certainly make them more accessible. I think that will translate the difference in the community if we get that right. So thank you, Jim.
Let's pick up one thing on that. One challenge for us at the moment is recruiting. So we are under by 1,000 police officers, and it may get worse over the course of this year. And I know our recruitment campaign for PCSO will definitely grow this year, but it's not yet clear whether I can recruit the full extra 500. So it's one area where you can help me here locally, both with communities and local authority. Anything, any opportunities you can see to encourage local people to join the police as police officers or PCSOs would be fantastic. We have a community outreach team recruiting. If you were wanting to help us run outreach events to help people understand policing, we're very keen for that support. So anything you can do to help, that investment of time will pay back. That will help us get the police officers that will police your area. So thank you very much. Lisa.
Thanks, Dan. Our outreach team are here if anybody wants to join. I do not think we have an upper age limit. So the next few questions, so I've got a few questions here for the Commissioner, and I'm going to ask them these because they're very dear to me because they're about neighbourhood policing. And I'm going to ask them because I know we'll have the answers because I know it's one of the priorities that the Commissioner first committed to when he took the role last year. So all about neighbourhood policing, and there's a common theme. So one of them is anonymous. One of them is from David and one of them is from Linda. And they similarly ask, when will safer neighbourhoods be treated as a long-term policing strategy rather than 6-month training experience, and so rotating officers? When will the numbers of safer neighbourhood police officers being abstracted for other duties be tackled? What are the plans to resolve this? And then there was another question, which I think you probably just answered, Sarah, about shortage of police officers and backfilling neighbourhoods, and are PCSOs going to replace them? So that probably sounds like 3 questions in one, but
No,
they're all the
great.
same issue.
So, I mean, they're all a victim, aren't they, of a net that hasn't taken neighbourhood policing as seriously as it ought to have done. Now, stabilising the resourcing across the organisation is not going to happen overnight, but you're going to see those abstractions reduce. So the police officers who are there are abstracting less. We are moving away from this training rotation where you've had new recruits spending 6 months. I completely agree, you cannot be an effective neighbourhood police officer in 6 months. You may be the best police officer the world's ever seen, but you still can't do it in 6 months because the relationships that role depends on can't be built that quickly. So I would like all of our neighbourhood officers to stay at least 2 years, to embed that approach in. So reducing the abstractions, doing that is really, really important. One example of how we're doing that, part of policing London is we have lots of big protests in the centre of London that we have to police. You'll have seen Just Stop Oil causing chaos for commuters and motorists, and we've been, in recent weeks, most days we've had over 500 officers in the centre of London doing that work. We've changed the balance of officers doing that, so it was very largely officers coming from the boroughs. Now it's a much more even balance between officers from specialist units and officers from boroughs. So we're taking a small proportion of them from locally. One example of how we're trying to have less abstraction.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got a couple of questions, and I think there's others as well that have been submitted around motor vehicle crime, which has been a real concern locally for residents. And it was a crime type that, in terms of theft of a motor vehicle and stealing from motor vehicles, was a real problem for most of my sort of first 6 months on the BCU. And we did see rises in that crime that were really worrying. The question basically is, what are you doing about that? What we did start doing about 6 to 9 months ago, Lisa was actually responsible for starting this with one of her team, was identifying those areas where we had hotspots or spikes in vehicle crime, and actually going in and giving out crime prevention advice. The chances of us catching a motor vehicle thief at 3 in the morning trying a car door handle are vanishingly small. They are opportunist thefts and hugely preventable crime. And there's some really simple measures that people can do to make themselves not a victim of crime. We've got into those areas where we know opportunist thieves are operating. Delivered quite a lot of crime prevention advice, giving out materials to help people keep the car keys safe, reminding people to keep the doors locked. And that's had a significant impact in those areas. And we're rolling this out now across the whole BCU. We're starting to see car crime for the first time in years come down quite significantly in the whole area. I think it's a problem we're still going to have. It's a problem we probably need to take back to the industry, because it's still, I find it strange that it's that easy to steal these high-tech cars. After many years where car crime appeared to have been solved through technology, I think we need to go back to where we were perhaps 25 years ago, where people were stealing cars for joyriding, and we designed that out quite well. I think now the problem has shifted. So there's organised crime linked to that, there's opportunist crime linked to this, and some of that we do need to get stuck into in a little bit more detail. It is important to us, and we'll do all that we can, but there's an awful lot that people can do to protect themselves as well, and we just need to help people understand that. So that was really the question around car thefts. We are seeing roughly about 5% reduction at the moment in overall vehicle crime in the area. So that's thanks to Kelly and Kelly Morrell and Don Roberts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I've got another question coming quite late, Mr. Rowley. I think it's coming from Debbie, and it's about the question is, what are the Metropolitan Police doing about sexual violence against women? And it specifically asks about perpetrators in the Met, and what are we doing about that?
So then general and then internal. So generally, thank you. Generally, there's that solving all crime is a starting point. So changing the way we investigate. There's a national programme of work which we've been a part of, which has been about changing the way rape and other sexual assaults are investigated. So you're much more focused on the offender and less focused on the victim. There are things about our criminal justice system which encourage us to sadly look at the victim, look at the victim's phone, etc., and take you away from focusing on the perpetrator. So we've been changing that, and that's been part of, say, going from one of the lowest number of cases solved in the country to one of the highest proportions. So we've been making progress on that. There's a lot more to do. The second point that Stuart touched on violence against women and girls is identifying the most dangerous men and going after them proactively. So identifying the men who are committing offences again and again and again. This is quite difficult because the numbers are enormous, and that's why we've got to use data and technology to do it. So this is a really depressing number, but last year in London, the number of men who were identified as suspects for violence against women and children, so this might be rape, sexual assault, stalking, child abuse, the number of men in London just last year who had at least one allegation each against them was 35,000. That's a frightening number. You can't identify the most dangerous ones in that by having people go through records. You have to use a computer-based solution. So I've got a sort of scientific specialist in this area who I've appointed, and so this is how we've identified the top 100. We've already sort of arrested 3 or 4 of those in the first few weeks. So identifying the ones committing most offences and most dangerous, and getting them off the street and causing more harm. We've got some ways we can enhance that approach later in the year. So that's the best way to protect women and children is to identify the most dangerous people before they commit more offences and get them out of the way. message there. Internally, frankly, it's the same issue. It's setting high standards, it's going after the people. Now we've got, because of the very clear message on standards, we've got more allegations coming forward, say from women officers and police staff, and we've got more investigations, we've got more criminal prosecutions of police officers, we've got more misconduct against police officers. And that's all working its way through, and so it's going to take time. Then they gas the cases through that publicly, but I'm pleased that as we shake the tree, those things are coming out. We're also looking back over the last 10 years, allegations that might have been investigated very effectively. As we saw with the Cousins and Carrick cases, there were previous cases which should have been better dealt with. We're looking back at those past cases and going after them. So we're doing both of those things to make sure that we get the men out of policing who shouldn't be here. It's a small proportion, but it's not acceptable and we need to be tougher on it. Is your follow-up linked to this?
Yeah, I was just going to say, what is the Metropolitan Police doing to stop this misogynistic behaviours within the net?
Yeah, so that's exactly it. So going after the people who are behaving in that way, setting really high standards. I set a standard across the organisation, being really clear that you can't justify misogyny through banter. You can't say, well, it's just a joke, it's just banter. That's not acceptable. So setting really high standards for our leaders to follow up on, giving better leadership training. So that's part of it. I talked about the cultural issue. So when I talked about the foundations bit, I said that our leaders haven't had enough training. So at the moment we've got 7,500 leaders at frontline level, so sergeants and police staff supervisors. They're all going through a week's leadership training at the moment, and we're well past 1,000 of them have been done. And one part of that week's training is about giving them confidence and the skills to enforce standards in terms of, if it's a minor issue, giving them confidence to intervene and to nip it in the bud. If it's a serious issue, knowing how to address it formally through misconduct for the proceedings. So we're giving them the skills to do it, as well as our specialists and professional standards. No problem, thanks for asking the question.
So, I've got a question from Linda that talks about neighbourhood policing shifts. So Linda Speedwell, thank you for that, about, I'm presuming, reflecting shifts locally to the relevant crime type, which I think is a really good question. And a bit of a challenge as well, Linda, about getting our police officers on foot more often, which I actually totally agree with, and I think that we will strive to do more of that. When you see police officers in cars, it can often be an assumption that that's their patrol method. Quite often we're moving cops around, and part of that is because of the estate challenges, the police building challenges that we have, and we have to move officers to their relevant patches. Hopefully we can resolve that in the coming months and years in Redbridge with a bit of a plan. And I do agree that we probably do need to challenge some of our officers just to get out of the cars and patrol a little bit more. Foot patrol works, we know it works, it's what communities want to see, and it needs to be proactive. And by that, I expect them to be out talking to people, saying hello, being inquisitive, asking people about what concerns them. So I think that's a practice that we can do a lot more of. Sometimes though, our officers are in cars for good reason, but I think Lisa and Jazz will be on the same page as me on that one. I'm just going to speed through a couple of other local ones, because I do think, I'd already had a conversation with Lisa behind your back, so we are going to open the floor up for a few questions, because I think there are people that have seen the first hand. But I'm just going to touch on the ones that have submitted questions first, then hand over to Lisa to just organise some questions from the floor, because I think it would be a bit unsporting to not do that. So thank you, Linda, for that one. There's a question about street begging, rough sleeping, which I do think is a real problem. Rough sleeping, street drinking, related drug offences that sometimes are linked to those individuals are a problem that I think we do need to tackle a bit more clearly with partners, and it's not something that police alone can solve. Some of these individuals are vulnerable. On the flip side, some of these individuals are operating as part of criminal networks. So we need to be really clear about how we're approaching those people that present as rough sleepers. Make sure that we're looking after vulnerable people and making sure that if they're not vulnerable and actually they're part of a criminal network, that we actually take action. We have done some stuff in Gants Hill and various other parts where we have done proactive work around this to tackle the organised criminal element of this. But I do recognise it's a problem. I definitely would like it to be on Lisa and Jazz's radar and certainly we require partnership support on that, because a lot of that links into other issues that we alone can't solve. And the final one before we open, unless you've got other organised questions for the Commissioner, Selina, I know you gave me this card, and you mentioned your son was brutally murdered on this borough 2 years ago, and we had a chat. I'll keep hold of your slip and we'll be in touch. Okay? Thank you. Thank you to all those that submitted questions. As Lisa pointed out, if you've written something on a slip with your contact details on it, we will get back in touch. So it's not a waste of time or effort or energy, but I agree with my boss who's just written a little note here to me, and we've agreed to open the floor up for a bit, haven't we? We've only got the venue till 8 o'clock, and then we get an eviction notice from you, I think, isn't it? So I'm going to hand back to Lisa to organise some questions. We will need to have someone to pass the microphone out to our community, and we're going to have to be nimble to get to the lectern.
I'm a resident in Ilford. Two questions. I mean, it would be a quick question. One is police response time. When there's a call for burglary or violent criminals in action, there's no transparency in terms of the time taken for the police to attend the incident. So can you tell me what improvements we've made on police response time? The second question I had, following on, Sir Mark Cromley, you said that things are moving, there is progress. How do we, local residents, judge you in terms of delivering on your objectives?
So I'll answer the response times question first, because locally that's something that has worried me for the last 12 months. And we've made significant improvements. We measure this in forensic detail. It's not hidden. It's not hidden. We share the data with partners. We share the data with a number of people in this room, and we will be really accountable around this. Our response times in this part of London have been challenged for years, and I've been working really hard with, I've got other senior leaders that work in response policing that aren't here tonight. We've been working really hard to improve our response. We've improved the number of drivers, response drivers. I've got more cops in our response function than we've had for years, and the final bit of the jigsaw that we're fixing at the moment is the fleet, and to give them the cars that they need to get to those emergencies. Our response times have improved significantly in the last 12 months. Go back to last August, in this area, if you dialed 999, it would take roughly 18 minutes from the point of dialing to the time that the police officers arrived. Seems like a long time, it is. And it is quite sluggish. That's around about 10, 11 minutes now. We're getting on average. There'll still be times when people call for help, and it does sometimes take longer. We need to improve call handling. Some of this, the bosses put some work in centrally to improve the 999 call handling. But we need to be more adept at getting there quickly. And it's pretty, if you compare that to some other parts of the country and other emergency services, it's a pretty good response time, I think. I'll give the microphone over to Ross.
So in terms of the wider performance measures, there's a lot published on the Metropolitan Police website, there's a lot published on the Mayor's website at City Hall and the MOPAC, that's the Mayor's Office of Policing and Crime. And as I say, as of September, so under Boris Johnson and Sadiq Khan, the regular scrutiny meetings between the Mayor and the Commissioner have never been public. There's been some documents sometimes, some minutes, brief minutes published, but the meetings have never been public. As of September, around the 20th, I think it's the first meeting, they're going to be public, and there's going to be regular meetings where Sadiq is holding me to account and some of my top team. And there'll be papers associated with that. So that level of accountability and transparency is growing. And Stuart's already mentioned some of the local arrangements, so it's a very fair question. Who's next? Lady over there.
Sorry about that earlier. Couple of things. Firstly, thank you for coming. very much appreciated. But when you have a listening exercise, people tend to want to come and speak. So if it's not a listening exercise, then just tell everybody to email, which is what we've all been doing previously. Okay, the reason that I am so fired up today is that I have a bunch of residents who are living in terror, literally terror. They've got a youth hostel, whatever you call it, opened up in their street. They're having night parties. Their children are terrorised. The women are terrorised. They're actually putting up frosted glass so that they don't have to see what's going on outside their own homes. And they've rung the police. This has been going on for a year. They've rung the police. They've sent CCTV. They've done everything that was possible for a resident to do, and yet it still continues. It's a disgrace, basically. I'm annoyed, as the local councillor for Valentine's Ward, that is happening in my ward. And I absolutely am going to keep pushing this until this gets resolved, because I don't want people to have to park right outside their house so that they don't see what's around their premises and they can just run into their house. It's a disgrace, basically.
Thank you for the question. People should not live in fear where they live. If there's a repeat problem like that that's terrorising the experience of people living in that street, that needs sorting out. Those sorts of problems often take a combined response between police and local authority. You sometimes end up with tenancy and other issues associated with it, drugs premises closure orders. There's all sorts of different tactics. Some sit with police, some sit with local authority. But I'm sure if we're not already on it, Stuart and the team will get on it straight away.
It's been going on for over a year.
Okay, so I think Commissioner's right. I've got Lisa here, I've got my Safe Neighbourhood teams here. I'm sure there is a resolution. If it's a premises housing, you say young people, then we can't just make it disappear, but we can deal with the crime and ASB that comes from that premises, and we need to be more clear what that plan is, because clearly if you as a local councillor aren't clear what that plan is, I think we need to sit down and make sure that you and the local team know what that looks like. So we'll try and solve that afterwards if we can with the leadership team here. Okay.
What I would say is that's a good example of what I want us to do better. So thank you for raising it. So we're an organisation where all of the direction previously has tended to come from Scotland Yard, and not enough of the prioritisation has come from local communities. And what I'm looking to do is to create a metropolitan police where a lot of the influence comes from local communities. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that we're going to sort that out in a few months. It's going to take some time. And you pushing us on issues like this is really important, because that sort of issue, which affects the life of many people in the community, is exactly the sort of thing that may not be appearing on crime stats, but is really affecting people's quality of life. And you will see a metropolitan police that gets more responsive, more agile responding to those. So thank you for challenging us. I'm sorry we're not there overnight, but we will get there, and the team will pick up that particular case, so thank you.
Good evening, sir. Thank you very much. I've dialed 999 unclean behaviours about antisocial behaviour where I live, and I've been told no one will come to you. I've dialed 111, whatever the numbers they want to give me, but no one ever turns up about this antisocial behaviour. With drugs, motor racing, loud music and everything in the car park. It's ruining my life. I live in a retirement village. And it's ruining my life. Now, I've spoken to officers on the beat when I've seen them, and sort of, excuse me, lads, but nothing's ever done. So I wish you could do something for me to do it. I've always spoken to Claire to give her the council side of it. And I wish the police would go down there from 11 o'clock at night till 4 o'clock in the morning. They're playing football, loud music. You can smell the weed, as they like to call it nowadays. But it's the antisocial behaviour side there. So thank you very much if you can do something.
Thank you.
I'll just say something, because I think that really links into the previous point around those long-term endemic, life impacting things that are happening in communities. And I think, agree with the Commissioner and absolutely think we can do more. I think the bit where you have to call 999 and dial 101 tells me what I think I already knew, is that we're not as well connected at neighbourhood level as we should be. And you should have, and communities should have a way of getting hold of your neighbourhood team that it doesn't require calling 999. So that's the bit we need to fix, the connection at neighbourhood level, so that you and your local neighbourhood team, the ward panels that exist, can tackle those issues and start to come up with some partnership plans around them. And again, as with the councillor previously, that's something we will pick up and make sure that we link in with you and address. Yeah. I hear you, and I just about hear you, but I get that there's probably a number of people in this room who are going to say, do you know what, in my street there's something happening. Some of that will be crime that we need to get stuck into because it's criminal behaviour. Some of it will be noise, some of it will be antisocial behaviour and individuals that are doing it day in, day out. In all of that, we've got a role to play, some role bigger than others depending on what the issue is. But what I would say, sir, is we can't solve every one of those problems here in the next 15 minutes. What we can do is introduce you back to your teams that can solve that problem.
Yeah, thank you very much for the answer, but it's just... Sorry.
I just want to say something. We're loads of organisations here. You've got the organisation. I work for the LPs as well. Perhaps we as organisations can come and tackle that antisocial behaviour. We can speak to you, we can educate you and build it that way.
Yeah, I've tried and I've got a mouthful of abuse and threatening behaviour. I spent 14 years in the army keeping the streets clean and tidy and safe in some of the worst areas in the world.
I think it's a genuine offer, and actually it goes to a point. So it goes to a point that we've made a few times on all the issues we talked about tonight. You talk about policing by consent, appealing principles, the police of the community, the community of the police. We solve this together. We can't enforce our way out of every single problem. Enforcement doesn't solve the problems, it shifts problems quite often. And we do require, thank you April for making that point, and I really appreciate it, it's exactly the type of community spirit we need to help us to tackle some of these really long-term problems. There are a number of hands going up. If it's about specific ASB in the street or a very single issue, just remember, if you don't get a chance to ask the question, you've got neighbour teams in here that we can put you in touch with your local teams and actually start to resolve these issues. Certainly, I appreciate there's going to be quite a lot of that. Who's next then? Where's our microphone?
I'd like to
There's a question at the back. There's a question at the back.
repeating something from 15 years ago.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, the microphone's at the back and somebody's waiting patiently in the back. Would you go ahead, please?
And now 15 years later you're doing the same, what will change? And I can see nothing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much for coming here today and giving us your time. Really appreciate it, and we really do look forward to seeing what's coming forward with the new Met. My question, however, is, while we're waiting for the new Met to come along, how about the crime that's happening now? I heard you say earlier on that we need to identify the most dangerous perpetrators through the computer system. I understand that. What about, why don't we take a step back? If someone makes a phone call, a lot of residents here have raised that question. If a resident calls 101 or 999, they've been told to wait. An incident recently took place on the 21st of July involving a young child. It's a safeguarding issue. The parents of that child are still waiting to hear back from the police till today. My name is Syra Jamil. I'm a councillor for Albert Ward. I'm also the Deputy Mayor of London Borough of Redbridge. But most of all, I'm a mother of that child. It really upsets me because I represent the whole council there. And I told my residents, always report, always report, always report. The more reports we get, the better. The residents of that area have reported many times. We've experienced it firsthand as well. And you always say that, are they even reporting it? But you know what, we are reporting. As a resident, as a mother, I did report. We were told to go back inside. We were told to go back inside and wait. 21st of July and I'm still waiting. My daughter, she doesn't want to step outside the house. I wanted to bring her here today. She didn't come, my other people didn't come. It's really shameful.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot of things you touched on there. The bit about why we waited for the plan, we haven't, and I think I've tried to explain in my sort of opening address that we have been doing a lot of this work, particularly against violence against women and girls, tackling knife crime, various other things to strengthen our community connections for many months, but we've got a long way to go. The Commissioner made it very clear when he took over what the direction was, and we've gone there. We still need some help, and we want advice about where we're falling down. We want criticism. I look for criticism because it tells me where we're failing people. So I welcome your comments, and we will seek to understand. You mentioned 3 or 4 things there that I can't dissect right here and right now, but I'll be keen to have a conversation with you afterwards and to see how I can support that.
Sorry, I agree that it's a 19-minute wait. I'm not doing it. I'm sorry, I'm not, it's unacceptable.
I have no idea what you're talking about. So I need to speak to you afterwards and see exactly what the situation is.
You said 19 minutes is the average waiting time for people to wait.
It's currently 10 minutes.
Currently, oh, even better. But what about in 10 days?
So
It's not.
I accept that we sometimes get that wrong, and of course we need to be more ready to apologise when we do. The vast.
We don't want apologies, we want action.
Okay, so if somebody calls 999 in Redbridge now, the average response time is 10 minutes. Okay? Back last August it was 19 minutes, just to be clear what I explained. The Commissioner did want to come in on, did you still want to come in on some points there?
Very selective who 999 will go to as well. It's very selective who they'll turn up, whoever calls for help.
Okay.
They will be extremely selective. And some will get no help or support at all, particularly if they've been at an event like this, a very serious issue. Every single one, the next week will have something I've identified and highlighted, whether it's violence against women, perjury, or anything else. And I've seen the bar with Jazz and Lee of the council looking down, not even looking around the room.
Next question, please.
I think it's got to be the last one.
Last question of the night.
Thank you. It's really a question to Councillor Atwell and maybe others. I've been promoting the notion of key performance indicators on. Okay, can you hear me now? I'm talking about key performance indicators for serious crime, knife crime, violence. I've been discussing it with Councillor Atwell in public. He appears sympathetic. The gentleman here has been talking about how do we hold the police to account. Well, we need key performance indicators. It happens in the National Health Service. Our trust has lots of information about serious illness, A&E wait times. Councillor Atwell, can we have some evidence about monthly stats, knife crime, across the spectrum, so we know what's happening in this borough, across London, so we can share best practice?
Certainly take that. So that data exists. A lot of it is already public in terms of issues like use of knife violence in public places, knife offences, robbery, theft from person. It's all public. It'll be put on the City Hall website, as well as some of it we made in public locally by the local council that we will share with them. So there's lots of data out there already. The public told us to account and do more of it. I think we're going to need to finish there because it's 5 to 8. So we're going to get evicted in a moment, which is
just one more question. I'll be very quick. I just want to ask, just tell former councillor, for our councillor, you cannot build our way out of problems. You're building over youth clubs, and there's a correlation between the lack of youth clubs that have been built over for these affordable housing which nobody could afford, to actual stabbings. There's a correlation. Now, I don't actually live in this area. I live in Newham, and Newham has had stabbings a lot there, but they do not want to put the stats together because it would be too apparent. You are closing down a club in Wanstead, and you're closing it down for a block of flats. That club will supply many a youth. That will give the police a chance to build relationships with the youth at a young age. That's called early intervention. Now we need to be tackling all our problems at a young age. Youth clubs is the way forward. Your building projects, and you said that when you were elected, that all these buildings is like a jungle, we're building jungle. You're doing the exact same thing, sir. But you are decimating youth clubs.
Thank you, sir.
Well done.
Sir, can I just say that you know nothing of what you speak?
I know.
No, hold on. Listen to me. Listen, I can because we have Oxford Youth Centre. We have lots. We'll leave it there. If you don't want to listen for an answer, no problem. Absolutely no problem.
Every single time someone calls you out,
If people have got local questions, they've not had the opportunity to ask. There are lots of police officers here.